we were working out of the house, which is kind of no-no land in the bike industry. And within a few months, I was found out and quickly put out of business because I didn't have a storefront. And I think I was 17 at the time. I went to my dad and said, "Hey, Dad, I have this business going, and would you co-sign on a lease to get me a store going?" And so he co-signed on the lease. We started up the store. I was still in high school. I hired my first employee.
I'm super excited to sit down today with Mike Cachat, a pioneer who literally invented the concept of selling complete bikes and bicycle parts online before it was ever a thing. As the founder of Jenson USA, Mike turned a teenage passion into a business venture with serious legs that shaped the way us cyclists around the world shop today. Mike, welcome to the Outdoor Industry Executive Voices podcast.
Thanks, Tony. Great to be here and appreciate you having me on.
I've been looking forward to it. Mike, I don't want to take for granted that everyone who is going to get an opportunity to listen to this today knows your story. And I was hoping that would be a great part for us to start. If you would be able to share really how you got your start and how you came up with the idea for Jenson USA, I think everyone would love to hear it.
Yep. It's a commonly requested story to be told. So I started working as a shop rat at age 13 at Supergo. For those in the industry a long time, remember Supergo. Worked there from 13 to 16. I was racing mountain bikes. I was sponsored by Specialized. Not really, but then I had this dream of being a pro mountain bike racer. Just needed to get to the races. And there was the California Cup Series. Couldn't get to the Sea Otter race due to funds, and I ended up second in the series as a result of missing that race. Came home from that race, and I said, I'm quitting my job. I'm going to start a mobile bicycle repair business so that I can make some money faster and get to the races so I can make a name for myself. And so that's kind of how it started. And then customers started wanting parts, and the mobile bicycle mechanic part was taking up a bunch of time. I wasn't able to train as much. So then I came up with this idea of starting a mail order parts business. And that was the beginnings of Jenson USA, was just a mail order parts business in 1994.
I have a question about the mail order because there's probably a decent amount of people who are listening right now that don't totally understand what that is. How did you get the customers to start the mail order process and taking orders?
Well, I had just put an ad in the back of a magazine. I got a 800 number piped into the house. I started the business in the house. GT Right Way was a big distributor down the street. We were actually in the same city, just kind of coincidence, or was it? I don't know. We could debate that conversation and topic, and so I would list the parts in the ad in the magazine. Customers would call. I'd pick up the phone. I'd take the order. Then I would get the parts from GT Right Way. They would ship, or I'd go pick them up and then ship them off to the customer. So really just magazine advertisements, and that's how it started. Then I developed a catalog. I would buy mailing lists from list suppliers that would have customers that I thought might be interested in cycling products, and I'd mail the catalog to them. That was some years into the business, but so that's how I started initially getting customers. Kind of a funny story. We were working out of the house, which is kind of no-no land in the bike industry. And within a few months, I was found out and quickly put out of business because I didn't have a storefront. And I think I was 17 at the time. I went to my dad and said, "Hey, Dad, I have this business going, and would you co-sign on a lease to get me a store going?" And so he co-signed on the lease. We started up the store. I was still in high school. I hired my first employee, and he would get in and start taking orders, helping customers that walked in. And then when I got out of school, I'd run over there and take up the reins and get things going. So it was pretty crazy times.
I got to go back a little further into your story. So you get a 1-800 number piped into your house. How long was it when the phone line was there and existent till you got your first call? And what was it like waiting for that first call?
That's a good question. So I got the 800 number piped in. The ad debuted, I think it came out like end of May, beginning of June of 95. And the phone started ringing as soon as that magazine dropped. I mean, it was kind of amazing. I didn't realize how many phone calls I would be getting. But I had 2 or 3 lines in the house and they were all lighting up and I couldn't help everyone. So I went and got this digital recorder to kind of get people into a queue, if you will, so I can kind of go back and forth between the different calls coming in. It was really exciting. I mean, I had no idea that, I would get that many phone calls and people would be, seeking these hard to find parts. And I knew I was onto something because a lot of shops just don't carry the high end, the hard to get, the sought after parts that we had available.
At that time, what do you remember any of the parts that were what initially created the intro? They saw the ad, they call you up, and then what was the part they were after?
It was all, I mean, just everything that's in the industry today. We've got RockShox. I was selling spin wheels like crazy. Those are gone, but everything Shimano. So it was back then too. Manitou, the original Manitou suspension fork was going crazy and highly sought after. So it was just stuff that was new and that was being developed and on the forefront of new technology, whether it was components or handlebars or suspension, whatever it might have been. So we were just leaning into all of that.
That's a long time to be in business. I've been in business for 14 years. You're more than double how much time I've spent in the business. And there's been ups and downs with Highline Outdoor Group. But I'm really curious from your perspective, because the size and scale of business is so different. If you look back, Mike, what were 2 of the most challenging times that you had in business over the past 33 years?
Well, just to clarify, my 33 years in the industry starts with my bike shop experience, but Jenson is 30 years. It'll be 30 years coming up in October. So just another few weeks or so is my 30-year anniversary running Jenson. But as I look back on that time period, the first challenging time was when we almost went out of business. It was 97, 98. We had grown each year 100, 200, 300%. Like the growth was crazy. That was masking a lot of the fact that we were actually losing money. I thought we were making money, but we were actually losing money the whole time. And we had built up a debt of, I don't know, close to $1 million. We were upside down in the business, losing money. And when the growth slowed a little bit, all of a sudden we couldn't pay our bills. We ran out of money. I couldn't pay employees. It was quite a challenging time. I had to let a bunch of good folks go, and we scaled down to just a handful of skeleton crew. I was already working 15, 16 hours a day, so that continued, and it was a real challenging time. And my mentor, which was my dad, said, well, I think you should probably declare bankruptcy, go out of business, go to college, get your education, and then you can kind of restart when you graduate. And number one, I couldn't leave the bike industry with that much debt. That was going to impact my friends and people that I did business with. And that was just unacceptable to me. And number two, I have this philosophy: if something's not producing the results that you want, do the opposite. What is it at the core that you're doing, and what are the results that you're not desiring, and what is the opposite at the core? And so I did a lot of soul searching and came up with what really are 6 core values that we operate from today at Jenson. And at that time, we weren't being very forthright with our customers. We would tell them we had stuff in stock when we didn't. We weren't paying our bills on time. Obviously, we're almost out of business. But we weren't telling our vendors and partners that we do business with the truth. We weren't telling them what was really going on. We were lying to them and saying, oh, the check's in the mail. Oh, I don't know, maybe it got lost. We'll have to resend it. And so another core value was formed: be honest and open. And that means a lot more than just telling the truth with our vendors, but being honest with yourself and being introspective. And so that was definitely a challenging time, but an important time and an important experience to go through. And if you're getting into business or in business, you'll definitely have those challenging times that'll test you. And as we say here at Jenson, you just have to keep pedaling.
I like that. I think everyone listening, remember that. Just got to keep pedaling because we're all going to go through challenging times. So that was 19. How old were you in 1998? You would have been
1920, something like that.
And to be $1 million in debt, having to find ways to communicate with the individuals that you owe the money to. And so what was going through your mind when your dad said you should close up shop, file bankruptcy, and go to school? Did you give that any consideration, or did you feel like there was no way that you could give up on this yet? Or at that moment, there's obviously a very pivotal point in your professional life, and that's a very personal part of your life too.
It was not even something I considered. There was no way I was giving up. If there's something that I have that I recognize in myself, and that's a tremendous amount of courage and I think about just even in riding and cycling, just that mentality to just keep going through whatever pain you're experiencing and keep going, keep pedaling. So it was definitely not an option to give up to. There was just no way that I could do that, to just say, oh, bankruptcy is what we're going to do, and I'm going to screw the whole industry. I would never be able to set foot in the industry again. It was my passion. It's what I loved. And being able to combine my passion for cycling and mountain biking and everything that goes along with it with business, there's just no way. So It was not an option in my mind.
Well, Mike, that takes courage even to share that in this type of format. So that would have been, 98, that would have put us about 22 years ago. And when we think of the last 22 years, was there any other moments, or what was the next most challenging moment that Jenson faced over really coming out of near bankruptcy into what it is today?
Well, as with any business, you go through different growth phases, and I did everything initially. And then I had to hire people and delegate and lean into that skill. And today I call it giving away my leadership, because there's just no way one individual can do everything. And then as the leader of the organization, if you're holding on to everything and not allowing the people that you've hired and entrusted to do key parts of the business, then you are going to stifle your growth. So I first started giving away the leadership of the business probably in 96, 97, continued 98, and even to this day. So I would say that's one of my key takeaways. And then, when I implemented that leadership structure, it was like the ceiling that we had hit raised to a skyrise, and we started growing again. We rebuilt the business. We got the financials of the company right-sided. We paid off all that debt, and we grew tremendously. And then we hit another ceiling, and you start pounding your head against the wall. It's like, why can't we get past this point in time? And so it's, again, self-reflection, looking at the team that you have. What are the obstacles? I am a big believer in bringing in help whether that's a consultant or leadership training or a book or podcasts or whatever. You can get educated in business in a multitude of different ways. But I would say it was probably 2010, we had hit another ceiling. We were just unable to get past, I think we were at 30 million. Like, why can't we get past this point? It was just seemingly impossible. We had been bumping around that for a year and a half or so. So I brought in a consultant and he said, Mike, what's your execution methodology? I said, what do you mean? We just come up with ideas and we just do it. It's like, well, that's great, but clearly it's not working. So he introduced me to, he didn't introduce me. He asked me to research different execution methodologies. How are you going to structure getting things done, coming up with ideas, prioritizing, making sure things are set up in a proper way? And so I did a bunch of different research and I settled in on an execution methodology called scaling up. Back then it was called Rockefeller habits. And they have kind of a 10-point checklist of the various habits that the Rockefellers use to grow their businesses and have been proven to be successful in other businesses. So we adopted that as our execution methodology, and we started on the path to implement and make sure that we had these 10 items on the Rockefeller Habits checklist implemented here at Jenson USA. And wouldn't you know it, we busted through that barrier within a month or two after implementing this. And it was just like someone, removed the barrier that was blocking us. And so that was, I'd highly recommend others in business to find your execution methodology. Today, we use a methodology called Traction. We switched from the Rockefeller habits and we use Traction now. Both very similar, but so anyways, that was one of the last challenges we had and how we got over that.
In 2010, and you hit that ceiling, and then implementing, obviously there's 10 stages in the Rockefeller system. Do you remember, is there any of those 10 bullet points that are really impactful, that are still relevant even today, before you took on Traction, and which I'm familiar with Traction? I read Traction about 4 weeks ago. There's a consultant that I work with, and he has been talking a lot about the entrepreneurial operating system, which is something I truly believe in. And really, Traction is a catalyst to understanding what that is. But I'm curious, from the Rockefeller system, is there one or two that anyone listening right now, that you would share and say, these are really impactful and something you may want to consider before they maybe move on to Traction next?
Well, they're all good and they're all important. You can just quickly Google Rockefeller habits checklist and it'll pop up and you can see them. It's not hidden behind any sort of paywall. One that stands out to me that I think is important, I think it's number 7 or 6 or 7, somewhere in that range, but it's having customer feedback data as often and accurate as financial data. So often as a business, we look at our financial performance, right? Every day, what are sales? Every month, how are we doing profit-wise? Of course, that's a critical habit as well, but how are your customers liking your service and products that you're offering? And so we implemented that, and we developed a methodology to have daily and customer feedback data as accurate and timely as our financial feedback data. And so to this day, we track every single customer comment through every single mode that customers can leave comments. And of course, we're also looking at our star ratings. But we've found as a company that looking at the actual customer feedback comments, what are they saying online? What are they saying in our surveys, internal and external? And is it positive? Is it negative? And if it is negative, what are the areas that we can pull out and make the notes on to make improvements? So that's something that we've done. I think that's been highly critical for our success. It's our number one core value. Customers are everything, show them the love.
I love that. and that is summoning that feedback and asking for it. A lot of entrepreneurs, that's a very daunting ask, right? Because you don't always know what's going to come back. And clearly you've embraced that. And I'm just curious, Mike, is there any piece of feedback that you received over the years that when you look back and you're like, this was so impactful, but helped you then innovate how you help customers? Is there any one of those that would stand out to you?
Well, usually a lot of the feedback is something that's broken in our systems and so we've done all sorts of projects to improve based on the customer feedback. Just thinking about our bike delivery process, that whole experience has been revamped. I don't even know, 24 times based on customer feedback. The rotor was bent. All right, well, let's invent a new way to package the bike so that the rotor is not bent. We take great pride in delivering a bike ready to ride within 3 minutes. And that is difficult to package because it requires a large box, number one. And you can't create too much packaging. Otherwise, the bike can't be ridden in 3 minutes. And so we're really proud of that experience. And that came as a direct result of customer feedback. In the very beginning of the business, we had a lot of mistakes. We would ship the wrong product to a customer and they would be very frustrated, obviously, right? You order XYZ and you get the wrong thing and you've got an event or a race or a ride that can't happen now and you got to return it and we've got to send out the right one. And so we implemented a complex order fulfillment system that essentially does not allow the wrong product to ship out. Occasionally it does happen, but that's a piece of feedback that we hardly ever get now. And in fact, we commonly get, I can't believe how fast my item arrived and it was in perfect condition. That's one of the top comments that we get as a positive on the positive side of things.
I love it. It's the innovation, right? And that's the feedback obviously helped you create that or develop the innovation to, number one, be able to package a bike so it's easier to take out of the package and get onto it right away. But also, we've all probably had things that were shipped to us wrong. I don't want to throw REI under the bus, but I ordered a pair of shoes from them and they shipped me a pair of shoes that weren't just used. They still had the dirt in the treads and dust along the sides. And I kept thinking, this missed some sort of checks and balance. I'm sure they have that. I'm sure it was a fluke and a one-off. But bike parts, there's so much nuance where, like you said, one rotor could look exactly like another rotor, but they can be a different pattern or whatever. That's interesting. And I also I went through an exercise really early 2023 where I went and started to request feedback and I tried different ways to get it from my customers. And I heard some things I didn't want to hear, but allowed me to change things. And it's very coincidental. It's kind of interesting. This podcast that we're recording together right now was based on feedback where some of the candidate profiles that we write up on every candidate that gets interviewed, my hiring manager said, Tony, this is a really great write-up, but I'm so busy, like reading through it is so time consuming. And so for him specifically, I bought this microphone and I talked through my feedback on the candidate. And that led to one thing, and then it became video. And then one thing led to another, which ultimately became the podcast. I don't think I'm going to do my candidate profiles all verbally like this, but if a customer asks me, I'm prepared to do it and I will. Going back to the book Traction in the Entrepreneurial Operating System, you obviously read the book. Did you do any kind of formalized training with that with Jenson USA? Do you do there's a very specific meeting that they do, it's the level 10 meeting?
The level 10. Yep,
implemented it?
We do that.
Really?
We hired a facilitator to help us implement, both Traction and prior to that, the Rockefeller habits are scaling up. We hired a facilitator. Like I said earlier, I'm okay spending the money on bringing in professional help. I get value out of it. As people, as humans, we learn from each other and bringing different thoughts into the company. And you always get a nugget, 2, 3, 5, sometimes more out of having facilitated help. So yeah, we brought in a facilitator. We don't use one now, but yeah, we have the level 10 meeting. It's called level 10 because at the end, you're supposed to vote. Everyone goes around the room and votes on how would you rate this meeting from 1 to 10. And the goal is for everyone to say, yeah, it was a level 10 meeting. So yeah, we do that. We also do they call it VTO, vision, traction, and what does the O stand for? I don't even remember. I don't know. Anyways, I know vision and traction, but we have the VTO. So the vision is the 1 to 3 year plan. Vision is your core purpose, your values, your 10-year target, or BHAG. What's that big, hairy, audacious goal that you're going for at Jenson? At 250,000 rides by 2030. Rides being a bike or maybe some other piece of equipment that a consumer would use to experience the outdoors. And then traction is your 1 year goals. You need to have anywhere from 1 to 4, 5 at the most key priorities that you're going to work on in the year to help you achieve your vision and your BHAG, or 10-year target, as Traction calls it. And then it breaks down into the quarters. What are you doing? What are the 1, 2, 3 things that you are going to do in the quarter to get you to your annual priorities or goals? And so every quarter we have a recalibration meeting. We sit down, we review our annual goals. Are we on track? Are we off track? What are we going to do in the upcoming quarter to continue to move us forward? And then the level 10 meeting, which is the weekly meeting, is where we sit down and we go over the quarterly goals and talk about, are they red? Are they green? And there's also a system online. It's called 90.io. We utilize that. And it's great. It's got a data section. You can put all your KPIs in there. You have all your goals. You have different users. There's tasks that could be tracked. It's a pretty good system. And that's our execution methodology. So yeah, we're doing a lot of it.
That's awesome. And that doesn't surprise me that you would implement that type of system. As part of my business as a leadership consulting practice, and while I'm here in Indianapolis right now, I'm actually going to go through EOS training, and there is now a non-proprietary version. It's called BOS, which anybody can use, but it's the exact same methodology. The gentleman who owns EOS, the system, actually lives here in Indianapolis. I haven't met him yet, but I have a feeling that's going to happen here soon.
Oh, that's cool.
It is cool. And it's super cool to hear that you have implemented it. We've known each other for, I don't know, maybe 12 or more years. I feel like I can't remember which Interbike we first met, but that doesn't surprise me that you would deploy such a impactful structure to reaching your goals of the business and your senior leadership team. I think that's pretty awesome. I have another question. I've been thinking about this a lot since the last time you and I met. Is you have 2 young adult children, and both of them right now are thriving, and they're athletes, they're competitive, they're having success. And 30 years of running a very intensive business. We've talked through some of the stages of hiring the right leadership. But how on earth do you balance being so involved in their lives and also running a business? Like, how did you find that balance with them?
Well, you make it a priority, or I made it a priority. I wanted to be involved in their lives and what they're doing, and my family is my number one driver. When my daughter was born in 2005, up into that point, the business, we finally had gotten through that time period of where we were upside down and paid off all the vendors and got right-sided. I think we were through that by 2001. But we would have a year where we would make money, and then the next year we would lose money. Or 3 months we would make money, and then 3 months we would lose money. I called it this yo-yo effect. Overall, we were moving in the right direction, but that was really stressful. And when my wife got pregnant with our first child, I was like, I've got to figure out this has to stop. That was when I brought in the first consultant that we worked with. And when I started giving away some of my leadership and honing my delegation skills. And then our second child came in 2007, and was continued. Like, yeah, I've got to figure out how to get this business to a point where I can have my family time, because I did not want to be continuing to work 12, 13, 14, sometimes 15 hours in a day. That's not sustainable. And so, again, one of our values is be a sustainable business. And sustainable means a lot of things. And so, since 2004, we have always been profitable every year. And I have made that a number one priority. And when you look at the Rockefeller habits, we still do this with scaling up, or I'm sorry, attraction. Obviously, you have profit goals, right? But the Rockefeller habits suggest that you should have a balancing metric. What if you're focused on profit? What is something that could be potentially forgotten about or impacted negatively because of the hyper focus on profit? And so we always take a look at, well, what is the balancing metric going to be? If we're focused on profit, then what could potentially be hurt as a result of that? Maybe the culture or the people in the organization are impacted. Could be customer, right? Yeah, you focus on profit and your customer service goes down. And so every year we pick a balancing metric and we look at the impact of focusing on profit. So those are some thoughts, but getting back to the core of your question, like, how do you balance family, business, and you have to make it a priority. If you don't, then the business will just overrun you, and you have to have clear boundaries. And so I set those up early on. When I get home from work, business is turned off. And that was very difficult to do in the beginning because, I mean, it was my life. It was everything. It was 24/7. And that is just not a sustainable way of being. You have to have balance in life, and having those clear rules or boundaries is just so important.
You've certainly, by all accounts, done an amazing job with that, Mike.
And delegating. I mean, again, having good people in the right seats that are talented in their field of expertise, and letting go so that they can do their job. I often say, if I ever wrote a book, the title would have something along the lines of, there's a million and one ways to do something. Mine is just one of the million. And as an entrepreneur, that is so hard to lean into. You have your way of doing something, and when you hire and delegate a individual or expertise in a particular field of the business, let's say marketing, for example, letting go and letting that individual run the show, if you will, without being overbearing and or pushing your ideas too hard. Obviously, yeah, you have to be involved in the process and bought in, right? But you can't be so hung up on one particular way of doing something that it impedes that individual's ability to be successful in the role. And that is probably one of the most difficult things I had to learn and overcome. And it's not just in the work itself, but in just having different personalities in the business. I am a particular personality, and there's definitely people that are opposite to me, and that can create friction. But seeing the benefits of that personality that is missing in you creates balance. Again, it's all about balance. And you can't just have an organization all with the same personalities. You need to have different types of people and different roles. And that's just such a huge learning for me. I know there's a long-winded talking point here, but I'll further follow it up with, if you haven't read the book, Leadership and Self-Deception, I'd highly recommend it. And then another book called Crucial Conversations. There are some concepts in those two books that have really impacted my leadership skill and to the success of the business.
I appreciate those recommendations. I think that what you just said, Mike, is relatable to a lot of leaders that may listen to this. As a founder or owner of a business, we are very particular, right? Our brand, the way that we integrate, the way that we operate, the way we communicate, especially when you're customer facing, when you have thousands, hundreds of thousands of customers like Jenson USA, and even in this small world of my handful of customers, every touch point I want to be an exceptional experience, just like Jenson USA. And so I appreciate you sharing that. And there's a question we haven't had a chance to talk about it, but it's something I've been thinking about for the past several years. Is at the beginning of 2020, and I actually remember this, you and I were collaborating it would have been March, and so many of my customers and people that I knew in business started to pull back and they pumped the brakes. And you didn't. You kept your foot on the gas pedal when everything was kind of coming into light, that it seems like the right thing is to pump the brakes, and you didn't do it. And so my question, and what I've been thinking about, Mike, is when the pandemic started and manufacturing, supply chain, all those challenges that everyone went through, you kept your foot on the gas, and then things started to build momentum up for Jenson USA. But even more interestingly is you were there and ready to help people, and people needed to get outside more than we've ever seen it in our lifetimes. And then when the industry, I don't want to say normalized, had this really nice high and then started to come down, and how many companies right now they're struggling. I mean, I don't know if you saw the news, but right before our
Yeah.
podcast, the Pros Closet just shut their doors. And they were at a point, they had raised $80 million during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And today it's over 2 hours ago. We knew it was coming, or I knew it was coming, but like they just announced it. But you were still able to, even after the high, continue to have success. So my question really is, what did Jenson USA do differently, or what did you learn during this really high where some companies came crashing down like we saw today? What was your strategy? How did you smooth it out where many other companies in the sporting goods industry did not fare as well?
The first thought that came to mind when you started beginning to express that question was fear and leaning into it. I tend to do that. I try, again, going back to one of these books, Crucial Conversations, there's a chapter in that book called Mastering My Stories. And your reality is based on your interpretation of what's coming through your eyes, through your ears, and you can take input of the pandemic, for example, and certainly find why you should be fearful and pulling back. And I don't think that way. I say, all right, what are the positives that can come out of this? And I lean into fear because for me, it's a plane. You've got all these gauges and sensors and alarms that go off, and the pilot is in there and reacting to the different things that the emotion fear is an alarm bell. And I have changed my programming of what that would normally do to react to it. And so when something happens that causes that emotion, I stop and go, wait a second, that's an alarm. And I need to evaluate what's happening. What is the data that's coming in through my eyes, through my ears and other senses? And is my experiences in life, is it really reality? And questioning it and getting ahead of that emotion and not letting the emotion dictate and change what my actions might be. And so when the pandemic started, I started feeling fear. And initially I was like, we were making plans and getting ready we're going to do this and that and the other thing. And then at some point, I think it was in February, end of February, I was like, wait a second, this is going to be a tremendous opportunity. There's going to be an opportunity for people to really focus on their health and what's really important to them, making memories. And what is one way to make memories in this world? And that's getting outside and riding a bike, whether that's with family and friends or just by yourself. And so I started getting really excited and saw it as a huge opportunity. So that chapter, mastering my stories, making sure that I am aware of that little voice in your mind and having the awareness to go, wait a second. And emotions are great alarm bells. And so when I have a negative emotion, I go, oh, wait a second. What am I misinterpreting here? What's the data that's coming in or the information that's creating this negative emotion? And is it valid? And questioning that. And so that's just something that I've done for a long time. To your second part of the COVID whiplash, right? The industry came through, still going through that, right? There was so much increased demand. The supply chain went berserk. Then there's too much inventory. And when that first started to surface on my radar back in 22, again, what is the opportunity going to be, and how can we position ourselves now to be ready to jump into the opportunity? And so at that time, the opportunity was there's going to be an excess of inventory, and how can we help all the brands that we do business with get through that inventory? How can we be a conduit for the individuals who have too much, the businesses and brands that we do business with that have too much inventory, move through that inventory? And so we knew that based on our current inventory position going into 22, that we were not going to be able to have the capital to do that if we didn't figure out how to get our inventory situation right-sided. And so we made a difficult decision at that time to move through some inventory, and we had a couple challenging quarters as a result of getting through that inventory. But by the third quarter of 22, certainly going into 23, we had a lot of money in the bank and capital ready to be deployed to help our vendors out. And that's exactly what we've been doing. And so again, it's just taking in what's happening in real time and looking out, having that strategic vision to see what changes do we need to make now to be in a position, and sometimes making tough decisions. And I take my job as CEO very well. Another big announcement in news is I'm no longer the CEO. I have elevated my role to founder and chairman of the board, and we've recently brought on a CEO, Scott Huddleston, to help take us to that next level. And I'm excited about that. But anyways, I take my job, whatever it is, founder and chairman, very seriously, and wanting to make sure that the decisions that we make as a company have the least wake possible, right? Imagine your boat, and your actions dictate how big your wake is. And I want our decisions to have the least wake in the industry possible. And so we take that seriously. And also to our people, I want to make sure that we're here for our people and we don't end up in a bad situation where we're having to close our doors. And I feel bad for everyone impacted in that business.
Mike, none of that surprises me. I'm trying to keep the wake as small as possible. And a few things to unpack. Something that really just stood out to me is you're not used to saying chairman of the board,
no,
right? And so this is pretty special to hear you, and I could see it on your face. And something I've been wondering about is knowing what you were able to do by clearing out that inventory and then helping your vendors and partners. Between you and Steve and the purchasing team, you've kept some of these businesses potentially in business. And I bet you that story is going to come out at some point of businesses that this was almost a life raft in a way during a time that not all the businesses have made it through. So I think that's really cool. And I appreciate you sharing that. I know that you are someone who has always believed that a rising tide lifts all ships, and you found a way to do that. And that's super cool. So there's one other question. There might be a couple more, but this question, So 30 years in business, you've obviously taken an approach that's different than many founders, especially in the cycling business, but you've always been open to new ideas and always willing to invest, whether it's your consultants, obviously in your leadership team, which is very evident. But has there ever been, Mike, other businesses that you've thought, I'd like to get into that business?
I would say yes. There's other businesses that I've been interested in getting into. Currently, one of our projects for 2024 is to get into the camp and hike space. And I'm really excited about that. We're pushing along on that project, and it really feels natural. Camping is an activity that many of our customers participate in, and folks here at Jenson as well. And yeah, I'm excited about diving into that. Our core purpose is to inspire people to ride, experience, and explore. And so that certainly leans into an element of that core purpose in experience. Well, both two elements, experiencing and exploring. And that's some of my most great memories. That's not a word. But some of my most cherished memories are camping and mountain biking and riding multi-day trips out in Utah and other places. And so I'm excited to offer that. So we're getting into that line of business and talked about other opportunities that we might get into. But also we're really good at what we do and have to recognize that you don't want to get too far outside of your lane. What got you here may not get you there. And the way we do business here at Jenson may not work in another industry or category. And so we're really aware of that.
Well, the way that Jenson does business, I think that you're going to have success in the camping category of your business. So maybe a good closing question, because clearly you've been someone who can see the future or create the future, whichever way you want to look at it. But if you looked at the state of the cycling industry over the next 2 to 3 years, do you have any predictions right now of what may be a change that is going to take place over the next 2 to 3 years?
Well, I see nothing but the best for the cycling industry ahead. There is so much opportunity to continue to expand the breadth of customers and individuals that participate in cycling in all aspects of life. With e-bikes coming on so strong, what I've seen just in our experience here at Jenson is customers that we would never have. In addition, customers that started off with me 30 years ago that had fallen off and are back because they now have an e-bike, and it's given them the ability to get out there and ride again. And so I see tremendous opportunity in the bicycle industry in the years ahead with e-bikes, and continuing to see cities and local governments embracing cycling as a transportation solution and option. More and more younger individuals looking to live in urban areas where they have grocery stores and restaurants and all sorts of things at their fingertips, housing developments, embracing bike paths, and cities asking for those to be included in the development. So there is so much opportunity continuing ahead in the world, not just in the United States, but across the world, for bicycles to be an important conduit for people in their lives to get themselves from point A to point B, or for exercise, or for creating memories with their kids or spouses or partners or friends and family. I've not ever been more excited about the future of the bicycle business than I am right now. And I think that says a lot. So for folks that are watching the podcast or listening, the best is yet to come. And so lean into your fears and challenges. If you're facing adversity, do some soul searching. What's the opposite that you can do to overcome that? If you have folks on the team that you haven't fully let them into their role, fully encourage them guide them and let them do their job. Let their expertise that you hired them to do shine and come into the business, and pick an execution methodology, kind of wrapping up all the things we've talked about here today. Invest in yourself, whether that's through hiring a consultant, reading a book, going to some sort of training. Of course, there's also going back to school, a structured education. Of course, that's not the path I took, but always be growing. If you're not growing, you're dying. And so it's kind of a fundamental philosophy that I have. And then be courageous. Your folks on your team will admire you for having the courage to make those tough decisions, to lean into fearful situations, and to display that. Be vulnerable is another often untalked about leadership quality. We just had a two-day leadership training with the executive team on Monday and Tuesday, and it was a key trait that my team gave me, was that I'm capable and willing to be vulnerable, and they admire that in my leadership. And so, anyways, those are some closing thoughts. The best is yet to come, truly. It's just a core belief of mine, and I always look to see the positive in things. And Tony, it's great being on the podcast here today, and I really appreciate this opportunity to share some of my thoughts and ideas. And I think what you're doing is a great and wonderful thing. This is how we learn. This is how we learn as people, through other people's experiences and hearing the stories of others out there in the world. So thank you for what you're doing.
I appreciate those kind words, Mike. And there's not much to say other than, everyone who's listening, those are some very wise words that you just shared with all of us. And I think we can all take something with us as we go on with our day, our business, our week, our vacation, wherever it is that someone gets the opportunity to get exposure to some of your wisdom. And so I'm going to give a quick sign off. And this is a friend of mine and mentor. His name's Randy Watson, sent this to me. And because I'm in Indiana, which is, most people will be able to put this together where this quote comes from, but it comes from Colonel Eli Lilly. And it says, "Take what you find here and make it better and better."
So appropriate for the conversation we've had today. I love that.